Hello friends, this video on sources of energy part 9 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Conclude the part on conventional sources of energy. These were all which were conventional sources, that means our traditional sources of energy which we have been using since long time, right? So in order to meet up the higher energy needs or the increasing energy needs, people started coming up with alternative sources of energy, and they started calling those sources of energy as non-conventional sources of energy. So now let us see what all sources of energy are categorized under the non-conventional category. So what are non-conventional sources of energy? As I mentioned earlier, when I take examples of non-conventional sources, we can talk about solar energy, tidal energy, wave energy, ocean thermal energy, and nuclear energy. So if you look at it, all these energies will take care of the fact that the pollution is decreased. It does not have side effects of pollution and all. At the same time, these kind of sources of energy also tries to ensure that the amount of energy that is produced is considerably higher. Right? So now it is time that we discuss each of these sources of energy one by one, and we will see how do we harness each of these energy sources. So we will start with, so let us look at solar energy. As we all know, what is solar energy? It is the energy from the sun, which is a source of huge amount of energy. So we know how much energy we are getting from the sun, right? So now the point is that how do we actually utilize the solar energy for our practical purposes? Now, whatever energy comes out from the sun, only a small portion reaches the Earth's atmosphere. It is not that the entire energy coming out from the sun comes to the Earth's atmosphere. So only a small portion reaches the Earth's atmosphere, and almost half of it is absorbed by the Earth's atmosphere, and the remaining reaches the Earth's surface. So just imagine how much portion of the sun's total energy actually reaches the Earth's surface. It is something like this. Let us suppose this is my sun, this is the sun. The amount of energy which actually comes from the sun is E. This is the Earth's atmosphere. The amount of energy which actually reaches the Earth's atmosphere is E1, which is a small amount of E. Again, half of E1 is absorbed by the atmosphere, and this is the surface of the Earth. So the amount which comes here is only E1 by 2. So only a very small portion of the total energy of the sun actually reaches the surface of the Earth. But even this small amount of energy which we actually get can be utilized in many different ways. We can make use of this energy by converting it into some other form of energy which is actually helpful to us. Some other form of energy is nothing but electrical energy, because electricity is something which is in high demand these days, right? So now we will see how do we actually utilize, or how do we actually convert solar energy into electrical energy. So let us look at some of the applications of solar energy. Some of the applications include solar cooker, which is very common these days. People prefer solar cooker because there is no electricity consumption, right? You can actually make use of the energy from the sun which you are getting for free, and that can help you to cook your vegetables. Solar water heater, you can heat water without spending electricity. So that means we are actually saving some electricity. Right? So that is also a big thing, because when we already have energy crisis, when we already need so much of electricity, we can save some electricity by making use of solar energy. So this solar water heater is another application. Solar cells is a very wonderful example of solar energy, because solar cells are the one which actually helps to convert solar energy into electrical energy. So now we will look at the working of these kind of solar cooker, solar water heater. They all have the same principle of working. So let us look at the working of a solar cooker. How does a solar cooker work? What happens? The solar cooker actually consists of, if you look at the construction of a solar cooker, they have a reflective mirror of polished glass. If you see, this is a glass, right? The cover. So the cover itself, it will have, just beyond the cover, you will have a reflective mirror of polished glass. So why do you have this mirror? In order to concentrate sunlight, because if you concentrate sunlight, you are actually concentrating more heat energy to enter the mirror, so that more amount of heat actually enters the solar cooker, right? So in order to focus the sunlight or concentrate the sunlight, we have used this mirror of polished glass. Then the sunlight gets converted into heat, and this heat is absorbed by the black surface of the box. So if you see, this inside of the solar heater is the color of the surface is black. That's because black absorbs heat more than, we all know that darker colors absorb more heat than lighter colors, right? And that is why during winters we wear dark colored clothes. Why? Because in winter we want more heat to be present in the body. So that is why we wear dark colored clothes, so that they absorb more heat, right? Whereas during summers we prefer to wear light colored clothes because they do not absorb much heat. So it will keep us comparatively cooler, right? So similarly here we want that more and more heat should be present inside the solar cooker. So for that, firstly we have made the arrangement of glass so that it can focus or concentrate more sunlight to enter the solar cooker. Now once the sunlight goes inside, the black surface will absorb more and more heat. So more and more heat will also be absorbed. Now the third step is traps heat. So the heat gets trapped. The heat can enter, but the heat cannot come out. So we ensure that arrangement with the help of a tight sealed glass or plastic bag. So this entire arrangement or this entire cooker is placed inside a tightly sealed glass or plastic bag, so that the amount of heat which have entered inside should not be able to come out. So the heat gets trapped. Now on top of that, there is an additional effect of the greenhouse effect. What is that? This glass surface will allow the infrared light of sunlight to go inside, but it will not allow it to come out. Now what is the purpose of infrared light? The infrared light actually causes heating. So that means it adds to the heat trapping. So because of this, more heat is trapped. So it adds to the heat trapping effect. So that means the basic principle behind the working of a solar cooker is that more and more heat should be trapped inside the solar cooker, because if you have more and more heat, that heat can be utilized for cooking purpose. How do we actually cook things? We supply heat from our gas stove, and that heat increases the temperature and boils the vegetables or whatever is there, or vegetable or water or whatever. So similarly, in this case also, we want more and more heat to get collected inside the solar cooker. In order to collect more and more heat, we have made all these arrangements. Firstly, we have used a polished glass to focus the sunlight, to concentrate more sunlight entering into the cooker. Secondly, we have used black surfaces or black containers inside so that they can absorb more and more heat. Then we have used the tight sealed glass or plastic bag inside which we have kept the entire solar cooker, so that there is an insulation, so that the amount of heat which is absorbed by the solar cooker should not get shared by some other objects. So that insulation is ensured by the tight sealed glass. So this tight sealed glass actually ensures insulation. On top of that, we have this greenhouse effect. That is, this glass will allow the infrared light to enter, but it will not allow it to escape. So this trapping of infrared light also adds to the heat present inside. So that is how a solar cooker actually works. It is not only the solar cooker, but solar water heater also works in a similar fashion. So this is how we can utilize solar energy. Right? And solar energy is absolutely renewable, because we keep getting solar energy every day. So we should try to make best use of it. But now if we try to look at the advantages and disadvantages associated with solar cooker, what do we see? Well, when I talk about the advantages, it is a renewable source of energy because we get sunlight every time. Not every time, but every day at least. There is no pollution involved, right? It is easy to install, not very difficult to install. Many of you would be already having solar cooker at your houses, right? So it is very simple to operate as well. Now let's talk about the disadvantages. So when we come to the disadvantages, it can be used only on a sunny day. Now let us suppose if the weather is little cloudy, so you don't have sunlight at all. So when you don't have sunlight, there is no point having a solar cooker. So you have to fast that day, right? So this was a big disadvantage, that it can be used only on a sunny day, because there are certain regions, in certain parts of the world, most of the days are cloudy. You do not have sunny days, so you do not get sunny days so often, right? Or maybe during your rainy season, most of the times it is either cloudy or it is raining. So having a solar cooker is of no use during rainy season, right? Again, it can be used only in places where days are mostly sunny. The same thing, right? So this became a major drawback of solar cooker or whatever, solar cooker or solar water heater. Now, in order to overcome this disadvantage, solar cells were introduced. So now we will see the advantage of solar cell. So because what does a solar cell do? It converts solar energy into electrical energy. So now what you can do, that during a sunny day, if your solar cell works, if it converts solar energy into electrical energy, that means you are actually storing that energy in some form. Now suppose if you have a solar cell with you, the solar cell can give you electricity. So even if the day is cloudy, or even if it is not sunny or it is raining, you can make use of that solar cell in order to operate so many devices, because for everything you need some battery, right, or some source of energy. So this solar cells is a source of electrical energy. So the solar cell is advantageous. It is irrespective of the fact that you cannot operate anything when sun is not there, but solar cell was able to overcome that drawback. So what is a solar cell? It is a device that converts solar energy into electricity. Now, the amount of electricity that is produced by a single cell is not much. So multiple solar cells together form a solar cell panel to provide enough electricity. So in order to enhance the output, like how we discussed in case of wind mills, right, that many wind mills were coupled together to form to enhance the output. Similarly, in this case also, several solar cells, when grouped together, they form a solar cell panel, and this solar cell panel can produce enough electricity which can be used for many different purposes. Now, the working of a solar cell is based on photovoltaic effect. We will not discuss this photovoltaic effect in detail now, because it is not there in your syllabus at this level. So we will talk about solar cells in our higher classes, but for now you should know that it works on the basis of photovoltaic effect. That is why it is also known as photovoltaic cells. So solar cells are also called photovoltaic cells. So now let us try to look at so even though not in detail, let us briefly look at how a solar cell works. Maybe you will not understand it in much detail, but at least you will get some idea. Now, as I mentioned, the working is based on photovoltaic effect, because of which these cells are also called as photovoltaic cells. Now, solar cells are made up of semiconductor silicon. So you all must be aware of silicon, right? In your chemistry, you would have studied about this element silicon. So silicon, germanium, these are all semiconductors. What are semiconductors? I will not go into much detail, but just to introduce it, like how we have conductors. Conductors are those which conduct electricity. Insulators are those which do not conduct electricity. So semiconductors are an intermediate between conductors and insulators. That means semiconductors have the capability to conduct electricity if some changes are made. So that means it is not that they cannot conduct electricity, they can conduct electricity, but only under certain situations, right? So the solar cells are made up of this semiconductor silicon. Now what happens when sunlight strikes the solar cell? A part of the sunlight is absorbed within the silicon. So let us suppose this is my sun. This is how the sunlight falls on this silicon. This is my solar cell, right? So this solar cell is made up of silicon. So now please do not bother yourself with this N-type, P-type silicon. You will study about these semiconductors in class 12. So when you study there, then you will understand it in detail actually. So this is your solar cell. So when sunlight falls on it, a portion of the sunlight is absorbed within the silicon. Okay. So this portion of energy which is absorbed, this energy then kicks off electrons from silicon and lets the electron free. So there are electrons present inside silicon. Now when silicon absorbs some energy, this energy knocks off electron from silicon and makes those electrons free. And these free electrons constitute electric current. Because what is electric current? It is nothing but flow of electrons. So if you have free electrons, that means if you have electrons which are free to move, those electrons can constitute electric current, right? So in solar cell also, if you want to generate electricity, that means you want free electrons. So in order to get those free electrons, you should have some energy to knock out the free electrons from silicon. So you get that energy from sunlight. So when sunlight falls on silicon, some portion of the sunlight gets absorbed. This absorbed energy will then kick off electrons and make those electrons free. And these free electrons will then constitute electric current. And that is how electricity will be produced, and that is how solar energy will get converted into electrical energy, right? Now this solar cell will store the electrical energy in itself. So even when you have a rainy day or when there is no sun at all, you can make use of that solar cell to get its stored electrical energy. Now let us look at the advantages of solar cells. It is a renewable source of energy because it is again dependent on sun, causes no pollution, need little maintenance. There is no maintenance involved as such. No focusing device is needed, like as in case of your solar cooker or solar water heater, you needed the reflective mirrors in order to focus the sunlight, right? But in case of solar cells, you don't need any focusing device as such. Can be extremely useful in remote areas where power is not available or power is very expensive. I mean, in very remote villages and all. I mean, for people like us who stays in big cities and all, we have power available to us. But there are some remote areas where power is very expensive or power is not at all available. There we can make use of solar cells because solar cells is totally dependent of solar energy. And that too, it is not dependent on solar energy 24/7. Whenever sun is there, the solar cell can actually convert the solar energy into electrical energy. Then the electrical energy which is stored in the solar cell can be used to supply power to those remote areas even on a rainy day, right? So the solar cells can be extremely useful in areas where power is not available or is very expensive. Now let us look at the disadvantages. Initial setup cost is very high. I mean, for most of the things whether it is wind energy or it is solar energy, the initial cost is very high because for the initial setup, in order to manufacture a solar cell, the cost involved is very high. But then once it is manufactured, your maintenance cost is not high. So now let us look at some of the practical uses of solar cells. Where actually we use or we make use of solar cells. In radio transmission systems, TV relay stations, calculators, traffic signals. Thank you. Please visit examfear.com to watch free educational videos, try free online tests, get the best quality study materials, study from the best tutors and mentors, and much more. Thank you once again.